Good morning. We're going to go again over some general drills that we do. These are Meyer's dussack cutting drills that we've adapted for longsword. The thing to keep in mind if you're adapting Meyer's dussack drills for longsword is actually the footwork. So Meyer teaches this as a fairly right-hand lead dominant weapon, which means in a lot of his cutting drills, he's going to have you cut and then bring your back foot up into a gather where your feet are together to facilitate the transitions between the cuts. Bringing your feet together, maybe not the best idea for longsword. So where Meyer has us with the dussack, because we want to keep that right side leading, when Meyer has us gather stepping, we're going to pass through the transition. That's really going to be the biggest difference when we adapt these. But I think Meyer's dussack drills give us some good opportunities with the longsword to work on kind of our sword dexterity and maybe some tactical thinking that he doesn't necessarily go into in the longsword as much. So the first drill is very simple. We're going to start in ox. It would be steer if we had the dussack, but we're going to start at ox. We're just going to step and throw a vertical cut to long point. We're throwing a half cut. Now in the dussack we would bring our feet together, but in longsword we're going to pass with our left into this hanging transition and then step right back out to that exact same cut. So the first drill is very simple, and we've done motions like this before. We're going to be here, we're going to cut, pass through this hanging transition, and then back out to long point. And then we can pass back and cut as well. So the first drill is just half cuts through this hanging transition. And again, the big difference is the passing step rather than the feet together gather step to make that transition a little bit easier. Second version of this drill is just full cuts of the same thing. So we're going to cut all the way through so we're not stopping our line. But we're still going to pass through the transition just to make sure. So drill number one is to long point, hanging transition, full cuts, hanging transition. And Meyer says practice all your cuts with that. So that's a good drill number one. Drill number two is what I like to call the ox to ox. It's a plunging cut drill. So from our ox, we're going to step forward, we're going to cut, we're going to let this roll all the way through the plunge into our left ox, and then right up again, all the way around to the right ox. So we're just going to plunge. And again, we're passing rather than doing this gather step. And just like drill number one, Meyer says, practice all your cuts with that. So we could probably do one video per drill, but because we're doing an adapted version of this and I want to get into Lichtenauer's material with the ring gloss starting next week, we're just kind of going through these really quickly. Drill number three is the pulling drill. So Meyer says that the deceit starts with pulling. All we're going to do is start on one line, pull it, and oppose it with the opposite line. So for the vertical cut, I'm going to start my high cutting guard, my right foot is back. I'm going to step and start my vertical cut. I'm going to pull it and end with a rising vertical cut. So I'm pulling the first cut and then opposing it with the same line. Footwork wise, I'm still doing the two passes. So I'm going to pass forward and pass forward with both. So your initial step might end up being a little shorter. You're almost pulling your step along with pulling your cut. But other than that, it's about the same. And then of course we're doing all of them. So we can do a diagonal cut as well. I'm going to step, diagonal cut, pull, and oppose it with the opposite diagonal cut. If I want to do it with the left, I'm going to start with my left foot back, pull, oppose. The middle cuts, same thing, pull, oppose. And even with the rising cuts, pull, oppose. And again, if you're starting with any of these with the left, start with the left foot back so that you can do a passing step, pull, oppose. The last one is very interesting. Meyer's really using horizontal cuts to facilitate changing sides. So at the most basic level, we're going to step and we're going to do a diagonal cut, and then a middle how, a horizontal cut, into now the left diagonal cut. So we're just using the middle house to facilitate changing sides. So you could go forever going diagonal, middle, opposite diagonal, middle. That's pretty nice. He also has us doing, one of his examples is diagonal, middle, rising, rising. And the Meyer's specific, here's my 6-cut example. So it's almost like a little kata using this concept of using the middle how to facilitate changing sides, diagonal, middle, rising, rising, other middle, vertical, diagonal, middle, rising, rising, other middle, vertical. So that's Meyer's example with 6 cuts. He also talks about using the middle how to facilitate cross-cutting. So this example would be diagonal, diagonal, middle, and then diagonal starting from the other side. Diagonal, middle, and just that goes on forever as well. So like I said, these are 4 dussack cutting drills that we use for the longsword. I think it gives us some interesting opportunities. Just if you're looking at the book itself, make sure that where Meyer's talking about using gather steps with the dussack, if you're adapting it for longsword, make sure you're using passing steps instead. Hopefully this was interesting, and we will start with Ring X Gloss next week. When we get through that material, which will take a little while, that might be the end of this backyard series, because I think generally speaking the country is opening up and we all might be getting back to our normal kind of practice. I'll still make videos at that point, but maybe a bit more sporadically. Thanks a lot.